Let me begin with the war, which only in hindsight we could see that the war was incredibly beneficial for Israel. But when the war was about to happen, it was a very big fear. Everybody was scared in Israel because we were facing, like in 48, we were outnumbered completely by the Arab nations. The Arabs, they never accepted the establishment of Israel. And they were always doing provocations, all type of provocations, from Syria, trying to undermine the water system, the Mobile Sea, the water system, trying to stop the water that gets to Israel, from Egypt, all the time attacking Israel, despite the accords, the terms in which Israel in 1957 he abandoned, the Sinai Peninsula, and they suffered attacks. The Jordanians, against the agreements in the peace agreement, or the armistice agreement with the Jordanians, they never allowed us to go and visit the Kotel, visit Yerushalayim, Iyar, Rabbi. They didn't allow us to do that, and there were always there were snipers. So Israel never had peace from its neighbors, and they failed to destroy us, although they tried very hard in 1948. In 1956, Israel and England and France, or with the blessing of England and France, they went into Sinai, and they conquered the Sinai Peninsula because the Egyptians wanted to close the Suez Canal. That was their interest. It was because of their interest. We conquered the entire peninsula, but we gave it back to Egypt with some conditions. The conditions were, number one, that the peninsula, the Sinai Peninsula, should be demilitarized. No presence of Egyptian military forces like it is today. Today also, Sadat Begin, he gave back Sinai, but the peace agreement means that the Egyptians cannot bring their military forces, and every time they have to do something like that, for example, to drive away the Al-Qaeda forces in Sinai, they ask permission from Israel. So that was one condition, should be demilitarized, no military forces Egyptian there. Also, the UN emergency forces had to be there in Sinai Peninsula, stationed there. More than 3,000 soldiers were there, and with the backup of America, England, etc. And another thing was that the Straits of Tiran, they had to be open. The Straits of Tiran, they give, from Eilat, Israel has an exit to the Red Sea and to Africa and to India, to the Far East, etc. So those were the conditions. Now, in 1967, Nasser decides to forget about all that, and he started with these provocations that could be seen as an act of war. First of all, he invaded with his troops the Sinai Peninsula, invaded it, and he didn't have a very difficult time to get rid of the UN special forces there. It just told them, you have to leave. And there was very little discussion in the UN about that, and in 2 days they left. So this is a very important thing for us to remember, that every time they suggest, I remember like 10 years ago or something like that, 8 years ago, now the situation, Baruch Hashem, is different, because of this administration's policy toward Israel. But when we didn't have a very friendly administration like we have right now. They always said, yeah, sure, the Europeans especially, let's put UN forces between the Palestinians and the Jews. They will take care of it. It never worked, and always against us. Okay, so the UN forces were completely nullified, and Nasser said you have to go out, and they just left. They just left. Okay, so that was one act of war, because no military presence could be in Sinai. And the second act of war was that they closed the Strait of Tiran. Okay, and Nasser knew that he was provoking Israel, and they were all together at the beginning. You know, Egypt, Syria, especially both these countries. Jordan took a while until they agreed to enter into the war. Actually, Israel begged once and again. We will see this in a few minutes. How Israel begged Jordan to not enter the war. We don't need anything from you. Remember, at that time, we didn't have the Golan Heights, we didn't have the Sinai Peninsula, and we didn't have Judea and Samaria, and we didn't have the old city of Yerushalayim. So the old city of Yerushalayim and Judea and Samaria belonged to Jordan. The Sinai Peninsula belonged to Egypt, and the Golan Heights belonged to Syria. Israel was very small. Israel had only 2.5 million citizens. The Arabs in total, they had 100 million citizens. So President Nasser announced in Radio Cairo, he transmitted the following message. President Nasser announced that our objective is to seize Israel and liberate Palestine. So he said, "Oh Zionists, 100 million soldiers will destroy you. Prepare, because 100 million Arabs are going to dig your graves." That was the tune that used by Nasser, and everybody knew that they were gathering forces to attack Israel, to invade Israel again. So it was Syria, it was Egypt, and at the end also Jordan. Despite us begging them not to intervene, they intervened also in the war. Okay, so they made an alliance. Also Lebanon had a minor role, but he also played a role. And believe it or not, Iraq also was part of this this attempt to destroy Israel. Same thing that happened in 48. These were the nations that attacked Israel at the beginning when Israel was born. Now, because they were very, very, very afraid, they did something which I think it was the main zechut that we had. For the first time since the establishment of the State of Israel, they did what they did 2 days ago in Israel. They didn't do at the end, but they wanted to do Memshelet Achdut Leumit. Memshelet Achdut means when the two main parties, they get together. Let's say the right and the left, they get together. So at that moment, in the 22nd of Iyar, which is like 6 days before today, almost one week ago, 53 years ago, in June 1st, 1967, it was a very unique experience because it was like a miracle. The miracle was that Sephardim, Ashkenazim, Jews from the right, Jews from the left, religious, non-religious, more religious, less religious, they all got together. We all got together. And Chachamim explained, that our zechut to get the Torah was that Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged Ahar, Keish echad belev echad, like one person, one heart, one feeling. So this happened when we had to take these very crucial decisions, critical decisions, how to face an enemy that wants to annihilate us and is so much more numerous than us. So let me tell you a little bit about numbers. The most important number you need to know, besides 100 millions against 2.5 millions, is that they had 600 planes, whereas Israel had 200 planes. And they knew, it was known that this war was going to be decided by the air forces. Because air forces, they are the ones that can bomb the cities, but can also, they are the ones that can protect the troops that are in the ground. So they are so much needed, and that was going to define the war. And they had 3-1, the number 600 against 200, and even their planes were fabulous. They had like 4 MiG-21 that were like the most advanced planes right now. Like Egypt had like 400 planes. Egypt was the most important force in all this coalition. They also had 3-1 tanks against Israel, and not only numerically there were more, but also the quality. They had tanks of the last generation. Israel had tanks of the previous generation, one model older than the Egyptians. So they calculated there is no way in the war we can win this war. If they attack us, okay, there is no way we can win. So they made a very critical decision. This critical decision was to attack preemptively, to start the war preemptively, not to wait, because if you would have waited until the Egyptians attack, again with 600 planes against 200, there is no way that we can win, like in a natural way. We have to prepare ourselves naturally. Boreolam will help, but we cannot rely on Nisim and Niflaot in miracles. We have miracles, as you will see a little more. So a little later. Now, what did we do? What was the main operation? So the main operation of the 6-day war, actually, the entire war was won in the first 6 hours. If you want to know the truth, instead of this being the 6-day war, this should be called the 6-hour war. 6 hours. It took 6 hours to Israel to defeat completely the Arabs. But it took also divine intervention. There is no other way to understand this. Divine intervention. Borei Olam was there with us. And I'm going to show you why I'm saying this. So the operation that they were thinking about was called Mitzvah Mokeh. When I say divine intervention, please, I need you to understand what I'm trying to say. The way that we Jews view our interaction with Borei Olam is not that we are passive and Borei Olam does everything for us. Okay? That passivity only happened once, when we left Egypt and Borei Olam told us, Moshe told us, Adonai lachem lachem ve'atem tacharishun. He said, Borei Olam is going to wage war for you on your behalf, and you have to do nothing. When we were between the Egyptians and the sea, before we crossed the sea, and Borei Olam got rid of the Egyptians. He opened the ocean for us, and the Egyptians came in, and Borei Olam took care of them. All right? But after that time, like the next war was the war with Amalek, so Borei Olam helped us a lot, but we had to go and wage war. And from that moment, in the conquest of Israel, or beforehand, the conquest of other two people by Moshe Rabbeinu himself, Og ben Habashan, etc., we had to wage war. We had to fight. So when we fight, Borei Olam help us. Okay, so that's how it is. So it's a combination of the bravery of the Jews. Second, and most importantly, in terms of the human factor, the Jewish mind. This war was won with bravery, with Borei Olam's help, but mainly also from the human factor, with our intelligence. Okay, and as I will explain to you in a second. But let's see now what happened in the first 6 hours of this war. So the first 6 hours, you can say that they begin at 7:15 or at 7:45 a.m. Whatever you wanna say. It's both of them are okay. Let me explain to you why. At 7:15, Israel had 200 planes, okay, 206 to be more precise. So they sent 197 planes to attack all the airports in Egypt. All right, let me explain to you how does it work. Now, normally, the planes attack, and there is anti-craft artillery. There are radars, and although they were flying very, very, very low, less than 100 feet, above the surface, which is very dangerous. Okay, but the radars usually, especially the radars that they had, that the Arabs had, were using Russian technology, they could detect. They actually were able to detect the Israeli planes. Okay, so normally you send all these planes thinking, well, first of all, you have to see if they are going to hit their targets. Okay, I'm going to tell you in a second what were those targets. But second, you have to think, okay, of these 197 planes that are going to be detected by the radars, are going to be attacked by the defense artillery, anti-craft artillery, probably we will lose most of them. But perhaps we can disable most of the Egyptian Air Force. Now, let's see what really happened. Okay, so they had to get to their target at 7:45. What was the target? The target were all the Egyptian air bases, where the runaways were there to launch and to come back, and also planes. The most important planes were there. Now, miraculously, 3 things happened. Miraculously, the planes got to their target completely. I mean, there were no attacks and no planes that were shut down. Now, how could this happen? Okay, there were 3 things that happened that day. First of all, between 7:15 and 7:45. So the first thing that happened is that unknown to Israel, because nobody expected Israel to attack that morning, and already the Egyptians had some troops in Sinai, there was a VIP flight with the Egyptian vice president, the minister of war of Egypt, and the prime minister of Iraq. They were doing a flight of a recon flight to visit and to see from the air the beauty of the troops, Egyptian troops that were already displayed on Sinai, on the Sinai Peninsula, in strategic place. They were like inspecting these troops from the air, okay, waiting for the order of Nasser to invade Israel. So that VIP plane, he left the airport, he left Egypt at 7, and he was going to come back at 8. So they said, from 7 to 8, the Egyptians said, do not activate any anti-craft missiles or anti-craft defense, because you can hit our plane. So everything was like deactivated, and if you need if something happens, the Minister of War has to authorize, especially, the activation of these things. So when the planes got to Egypt at 7:45, the Egyptians were desperately telling the Minister of War, but the Minister of War didn't have the time to tell them, suspend the situation and reactivate the artillery when when they understood what was going on. It was already too late. Why? Because Israel destroyed all the runaways of most of the airports of Suez Canal, El Arish, Sinai, etc., and even some of the airports in the northern part of Egypt. Okay, so that was the first thing, that Israel didn't know anything about this VIP plane. Okay, so that was like the first miracle that happened that day, because between 7 and 8, that was exactly the time frame that Israel needed to attack, and there were no anti-craft weapons activated against them. Another thing that happened is that they knew that the Egyptians, they had like MiG, the MiG-21 aircraft were much better than the Mirage. The Mirage is that this is the planes that Israel had. They were from France and were like older. This MiG, Russian-made MiG, they were like amazing. Okay, now normally when they see the planes coming, the MiGs they launch the MiGs, and the MiGs can really hit very, very badly the Mirage. But what happened that day? Okay, so let me read for you exactly what happened and how this confrontation was avoided. There was a critical 15-minute delay. Okay, because every the MiGs, they would go just to do inspections in preparation for an attack or for whatever it is. Every day from 4:30, they would go, 1 hour, they come back, 5:30, then the second round, 5:30 to 6:30, third round from 6:30 to 7:30, then from 7:30 to 8. Now, at 7:30, they should have the mix. They should have start, to go on and fly. But the confrontation was inevitable. But the shift of 7:30 was delayed. Now, why it was delayed? Because the night before, the chief of the Egyptian Air Force, Muhammad Sidki Mahmoud, organized a party for his pilots the previous night to raise their morale. The party, which included dancing, food, and drinks, extended very late into the night, and this had the officers in charge of the shift of 7:30 to be delayed by 50 minutes. Now, these 15 minutes were exactly the time that Israel needed, because they attacked from like 7:40. If the MiGs would have been there at 7:30, the MiGs would have intercepted many of the Israeli planes, and they would have been able to hit their targets. Okay, so because of this incredible miracle, the MiGs, the planes of Israel were able to hit their targets and undisturbed. No MiGs attacked them. Another miracle that happened, there is no other way to understand this unless you say luck. We don't believe in luck, we believe in Borei Olam's help. Is that there was a coordination between the Jordanians and the Egyptians. And actually, the Jordanians had very advanced military equipment that they got from the English, from the British. And they had radars better than the Egyptians' radars. And although the Egyptians' radars, they might not have detected the planes because they were flying very, very low, the Jordanian radars, they detected they did detect the Israeli aircrafts going to Egypt. and they sent an immediate message to to Egypt, okay? And they were in coordination, these two armies. And the problem was that they had a code that they changed every single day, and the code that the Jordanian operator sent was called anab, like grapes, okay? But the previous night, the secret code had been changed. So at 7:30, when the planes were crossing into Egypt, the Jordanians, they were sending an emergency call to Egypt, telling them you have been attacked, react. But because it was the wrong provision, it was the wrong code that was used, the Egyptians said, no, this is not the code that we can accept. When the Egyptians finally realized that this could be a human mistake, it was too late. And Israel, not only, first of all, they destroyed with very, very powerful bombs, they destroyed all the runaways, they made all the airports, useless, and they also destroyed all the MiGs and all the planes that were in the ground. No one Egyptian aircraft was able to launch, to fly. All right. So that was, look how many things happened simultaneously. The VIP plane there, no activation of anti-defense aircraft, and Israel didn't know about this. Okay, that's why I say it's Borei Olam. It's not intelligence that they knew the delay of 15 minutes. There is no way you can know that the guy the night before had a party, and there is no way you can know that the operator in Amman, the Jordan operator, will give the wrong code. So Borei Olam was helping us, and in that operation, Israel destroyed 200 of, let's say, close to 400 planes that the Egyptians had. The Egyptians had 2/3 of the entire air force of the Arab nations. So right now Israel destroyed 200 of these in one attack. Now things didn't end there. Now what Israel attacked was where the airports in the Sinai Peninsula, near the Suez Canal, they came back immediately, and they already had a drill, the bravery and the training and the preparation of Israel. They already had a drill that they can make the planes useful again, with fuel, with everything, in 7-8 minutes. So they used the same planes, and they made a second attack. They went to attack the airport of Cairo, all right? The airport of Cairo, where Egypt had all the other aircrafts, okay? And that happened at 9:34. At 9:34 that morning, we're still in the first morning, 9:34, the planes left again, now toward Cairo. Now, there is no surprise factor anymore. The Egyptians know that we attacked. They are in chaos. They are really trembling, they don't know what fell into their head. Now, it wasn't possible again to avoid the radars, okay, or especially the anti-craft artillery fire. They couldn't avoid that. The Egyptians were in high alert, but still, miraculously, in the second attack, Israel destroyed 107 Egyptian aircraft and destroyed all the Egyptian airports. It should be 197, something like that. Egyptian aircraft, and rendered all Egyptian airports, military or civilian, useless. So even if the Egyptians had some planes in the ground, they couldn't use them because the runaways were completely destroyed. All right. So if they couldn't use their planes, they couldn't defend their troops in the ground. So in these first 2 hours, okay, from 7:45 to 10:45, Israel destroyed, here, the official number. Israel destroyed a total of 391 aircraft of the enemy Egyptian forces, which is 2/3 of the aircraft of the United Arab Forces, and disabled 26 military air bases and runways, neutralizing all Egyptian military and civilian airports. Okay, so now with no Egyptian planes in the air, Israel had full hegemony, full control of the attack in the air. Now, another incredible miracle that happened. Miracle in the same sense says that, you know, it says in the Torah that Borei Olam iksha et libo, he hearkened the heart of Paro. He made him stubborn. He didn't admit defeat. Paro could have saved Egypt 5 plagues, from 5-6 plagues. Okay, now I see the power of Borei Olam. Now go. Or Paro, knowing that Borei Olam is so powerful, he shouldn't have led his troops to chase after Israel and then have this terrible defeat in the sea if he knows how powerful is Borei Olam. So beyond any logic, against any logic, Paro went after them. But the Torah says explicitly, Borei Olam hearkened the heart of Paro. So something similar, strangely very similar, happened with this Mitzrayim, with this Egyptian Paro, Nasser, who was really a big anti-Semite and always hated Israel very deep in his heart. Now, despite the fact that Israel had destroyed all the 26 air bases and 391 aircraft, he in the radio, Nasser was saying, we are destroying the Israelis, we are defeating the Israelis. Now, Gava apart, that brought something else. That brought Jordan to say, oh, they are winning, let's go and help Egypt. And Jordan intervened, despite the fact that we warned and we begged Jordan so many times, please do not intervene. Now, why is this important? And Syria also intervened. Now, here is when at noon, the third attack happened, because Syria and Jordan started to bomb Tel Aviv, etc. They attacked Israel with aircraft, with planes, but the Israeli anti-aircraft artillery shoot down their planes, the planes of Jordan and Syria. And immediately at 12:45 of that same day, a group of Israeli planes attacked the airports and military bases of Jordan and Syria. And they did to Jordan and Syria the same thing that they did to the Egyptians. They destroyed their airports. Okay? And moreover, that same day, they got the planes, the Israeli planes got even to Iraq, and they destroyed the Iraqi H3 airport and destroying 21 Iraqi planes. So Israel destroyed that day at 12:45 100 planes of Jordan and Syria and 21 planes of Iraq, and disabled all their airports. So that's why I said to you that the war that started at 7:45, from 7:45 to 1:45, whatever it is, that was the war of the 6 hours, instead of the war of the 6 days. In these 6 hours, in these 3 attacks, first of all, the first air bases of the Egyptians, second, the attack to Cairo airport, and third, the attack to Jordan, Syria, and Iraqi airports, Israel completely erased all the air forces. Now Israel has total control of the air. So you see, what I say is like one miracle after the other. Okay, of course there is a lot of Jewish mind, as I said to you. For example, let me give you another example of the Jewish mind before I go to Jordan and to Yerushalayim. Israel had to still fight with Egyptians in the ground in Sinai, and the Egyptians they completely outnumbered Israel 3-1. So they had better tanks than Israel, and for every division of tanks that Israel had, they had 3. The Egyptians had 3. They had 2 facing the Israeli division and 1 as a backup. Now, every military man knows that you can go into a war with tanks only if you have 3-1. Israel had 1-3. So how in the war they were able to go and to actually attack them? Israel attacked them. So there were many factors. The most important factor was that Israel knew the terrain of Sinai better than the Egyptians knew the terrain of Sinai. Okay, they have studied for years, so they knew different. This was discovered only recently when the archives were open. They knew where to go and where not to go. They even developed some systems, something so simple, if you think about it. Like the Jeeps, they couldn't, if they would go in certain terrains, they would get deep into the sand. So how they were stuck, the Jeeps, into the sand. So how do you do that? So they just discovered something very simple, that deflating the tires, by deflating the tires, the Jeeps could run again. So they came from, let's say, from the back, and they were surrounding the Egyptians. Okay, although they were 3-1, to make a very long story short, the Egyptians, they ran away. They just retreat. And I was seeing a documentary today where one Egyptian captain, he says, the thing that bothers me the most in this war is that we got orders to retreat without fighting. We didn't fight. And when they retreated, Israel attacked them, it caught them and destroyed hundreds of tanks. I mean, if you see this documentary, it has like real footage. From 2014 is this documentary. Destroyed hundreds of tanks, of armored vehicles, and the Egyptians, they lost so many soldiers, so many tens of thousands of soldiers. But let me explain to you one more thing that is not very known. The Israelis, they also had the upper hand of knowledge and preparation. For example, one example, very important example, they, during the previous years, they trained themselves to fight in very hot areas. And a group of doctors, they did an experiment with a group of soldiers that they were running in a in August, very bad conditions, like tremendous heat. And up until that time, it was known in military warfare that the soldier needs 1 liter of water a day. Okay, and this is how the Egyptians were prepared: 1 liter for every day for every soldier. They found out in all this study, in all this research, that if they give to the soldiers 1 liter an hour, there is no stop, there is no end for what the soldiers can achieve. They can go for days and they will feel like nothing happened, because they discover that a soldier in those circumstances could lose up to 20 liters of water a day. So you need to replenish your water. So the Israeli soldiers, when they went with their tanks, they went also with the big systems of water. So they had, by military rule, they had to have 1 liter of water every hour, and that helped them against dehydration. While the Egyptians, I saw today in this documentary, they were saying that many of them, because there was such a chaos, they were without their units, without their tanks, without their commanders. They were like going, walking in the desert toward Egypt. Tens of thousands of Egyptians died of dehydration because they didn't have water, they didn't have the conditions. So you see how Israel was prepared in so many instances. Now, I think the biggest miracle here is Jordan's intervention in the war, without having any reason for it. After Jordan started to attack, and they started to attack Tel Aviv, Yerushalayim, etc., Israel did not respond. We're talking about the first day. Israel did not respond. They sent once and again messages to King Hussein of Jordan, please withdraw. We don't want to fight you. Okay, we don't need anything from you. Just don't intervene. Don't intervene. But Hashem iksha et libo, Borei Olam hearkened his heart, and he started the war. And because he didn't listen to the request of the Israelis, and he did something that was so stubborn, we got Yerushalayim. Because if the Jordanians wouldn't have attacked us, we would never have counterattack, and then Yerushalayim would have been in their hands until today. So that was like, nobody imagined what these results, right? This outcome that we will get Yerushalayim. So the Jordanians attacked us. It took hours until the leaders of Israel decided to attack the Jordanians back. At the beginning, the first day was all a defense war, and the most, let's say, that was at the beginning. Then the second day, Israel conquered the Shomron, all the Shomron, Samaria, which was an area that belonged to Jordan. So that gave us a little more motivation to go for the big prize, which was Yerushalayim. So the second day of the war, which is the 27th of Iyar, like a day, yesterday in Hebrew, like a few hours ago. So we conquered the Shomron. For example, there was one city, Shechem, very famous city. But another incredible thing happened. The soldiers conquered the city. They came into the city, and they were like welcomed by the Arabs with flags and with joy and with candies. So what's going on? You know what was going on? The Arabs thought that they are Iraqis, that they are the Iraqi forces coming to Shechem. They would never dream that Israel would not only survive, but counterattack and conquer territory. That was not part of our plans, to conquer territories. We just wanted to survive. And if anytime we dream of conquering territory, it could be maybe Sinai, but not Yerushalayim, or not the Golan Heights, when we were fighting with the Arabs. Okay, and the third day, only the third day, there were a lot of battles. I can't tell you the whole story, but the third day, which is the 28th of Iyar, which is like today, this is when Israel, from defense, it went into attack. And all of a sudden they see that they could go into the old city. And several things happened when we saw that we were going to move into the old city. it's very difficult to explain this, but you know, when we approached the old city, Levi Eshkol, the prime minister, I'm not saying this to blame him, but he was telling, like, almost asking permission from Hussein, from King Hussein, saying, okay, we're going to go into the old city, but don't worry, we're going to come back. We don't have any intention of Chas v'Shalom taking the old city. Just for your information, in 48, part of the terms of the peace between the Arabs and the Jews was that Jews should have access to the holy sites in Yerushalayim, namely the Kotel HaMa'aravi, right? The Jordanians never kept that term, never kept that promise, never allowed us from 48 to 67 to go into the old city, and we really that was our dream, but was like something beyond our dreams, and nobody before the beginning of the war thought that we will get to Yerushalayim. We were thinking about survival. So I think that you can see here that Yerushalayim was not given us by men, was really a gift from Borei Olam. The war the battle for Yerushalayim was not easy at all, but the 28th of Iyar, finally Prime Minister Eshkol authorized the Jews to enter Eastern Jerusalem. Okay, and here, let me read for you because it's unbelievable. He authorized, but immediately clarified to the Jordanians, we are going to move towards the old city, but once the war is over, we will leave Eastern Jerusalem, don't worry. And he meant that. It was as if the military and political leaders of Israel were afraid to succeed, or they were ashamed. They were saying, no, Chas v'Shalom, we cannot go to the old city because these are the places, think about it from their perspective. These are the holy places of the Christians, the sepulchre of Yeshua is there, and the mosque is there. They will never allow us. What will they do to us? So what would the Vatican say if we Jews, go now to the old city, to their holy places? So it's because of this complex that we were carrying in our shoulders for 20 centuries of being persecuted, of being always looked down upon, that we didn't have, the pride to say Jerusalem belongs to us. Baruch Hashem right now is completely different. But at the beginning it was very, very difficult, okay? So at the end, at 10 a.m. of that day of 28th of Iyar, like tomorrow, Commander Mordechai Gur repeated twice the iconic words, Harabai v'yadenu, Harabai v'yadenu. The Temple Mount is in our hands. The Temple Mount is in our hands. Then something happened, which I think, which is a terrible mistake that we did, inexplicable from the perspective of today. But again, you have to be at that time there, okay? Which is, what was incredible was that the Jews didn't run to go for, for the, to go for the Harabait. They didn't go for the Harabait. They went just to the Kotel. Now, they could have had, at that moment, the Harabait, the Temple Mount. And the Jordanians were actually, the Waqf was actually waiting with the keys to give the keys to the victors. And stupidly, this is probably the biggest mistake that the Jewish people made in its millenary history. Biggest mistake. They said, no, it's okay, you can keep it. So hard to digest. Now, one of the reasons for this is that during a long time. I mean, think from the time that Israel came back in the 20th century to Palestine, to Israel, they didn't think about the Bet HaMikdash. They thought about the Kotel HaMaravi. They actually went to the Kotel HaMaravi when they could, okay, until 48. They could visit. I mean, very, very difficult. But so they were thinking, when are we going to go to the Kotel? Nobody was thinking, when are we going to go to Bet HaMikdash? Therefore, when they conquered Yerushalayim, instead of going to the Har HaBayit, they went to the Kotel. The Kotel is a leftover, it's a ruin of the Bet HaMikdash. It's nothing, the Kotel, the Western Wall, compared to Har HaBayit. But we were so connected to the Kotel that everyone, Moshe Dayan, Mota Gur, all the great officials of Israel, etc., they went directly to the Kotel to pray, and of course, Rabbi Goren was there after 1900 years. So let me read this for you from a book from Hagi Ben Arsi, which is the book that one of the main books that I'm using here. Let me read something very interesting here. It says, despite this opinion, sorry, one second. Back in 1948, all of them had experienced the trauma. Israel in 1948 experienced the trauma of losing the whole city, the Jewish people holiest site, and the object of our prayers and dreams for generation. In 48, we lost it. Now 67, okay. Now we should get the whole city back. Despite this opinion was split among the government ministers. Many felt that this was a historic opportunity which should not be missed, while others claimed that since the world superpowers would surely oppose Israel's occupation of the whole city, the IDF should not go any further. They didn't want to go. They were afraid to win. We were afraid to succeed. Defense Minister Moshe Dayan asked whether we really need this Vatican. Like, it was really the main, let's say, culprit here, that we didn't have the Bet HaMikdash or the Har HaBayit. And Prime Minister Levi Eshkol weighed both opinions. It was only after long hours of discussion that the government made a decision which was to have enormous significance and implications for generations to come. And I think that when, we cry in Tisha B'Av for Yerushalayim, right? And some people say, well, we shouldn't cry, we have Yerushalayim right now. I think we cry for this mistake, what I'm going to read for you right now. We still cry for Yerushalayim because of this mistake. It was only after long hours of discussions the government made a decision which was to have enormous significance and implications for ages to come. To liberate Jerusalem's old city, okay? The order was given to charge forward while taking great care to make sure no damage was done to any churches and mosques, the holy site of the Muslims and the Christians. So it means that we will leave the status quo and we will leave the mosque to the Muslims, where the victor had the opportunity. When it's incredible. When the Jordanians conquered the old city, they destroyed every single synagogue in the Jewish quarter. So I don't know how you want to understand this, but that is what it is. So this is what Borei Olam wanted for us, and Bezrat Hashem, I hope that the next step in Yom Yerushalayim will be to have Har HaBayit really beyadenu, in our hands, and not Har HaBayit beyadenu and then give it back to the Arabs. The local Arab leaders were waiting on the Temple Mount and presented Mota Gur with a letter of surrender. They said, okay, here is, please let us leave, take the Har HaBayit, take the mosque, take everything. Out of habit and due to the practice of hundreds of years of exiles, the paratroopers did not stop to pray in Har HaBayit, but rather crossed the mountain and walked down to the western wall, the last surviving wall of the temple complex. So naturally everybody went to the Kotel. They were joined by Rabbi Shlomo Goren, chief rabbi of the IDF, who had accomplished the paratroopers at every stage of the fighting. I know that I'm thinking too high and I'm too utopically, but we missed that opportunity. It was Borei Olam's will, but that was the opportunity we missed. But other than that, I don't have the time right now to tell you that we also conquered Yehuda and Shomron, conquered Yerushalayim again, and Bezrat Hashem very soon, hopefully, is going to be annexed to Israel officially, finally. Baruch Hashem for the American administration right now that is giving us this tremendous backup. We also conquered the Golan from Syria, among other things, thanks to Eli Cohen, that 2 years before that, he gave so much intelligence information to Israel, how the Syrian forces are deployed, and famously, everywhere there was a bunker, important bunker, he told them that to protect the Syrian soldiers, they have to plant some trees, some eucalyptus. So that was in 65, okay, before he was killed. And in 67, still, because of Eli Cohen, the Israelis knew everything about the Syrian army, and they even knew about the eucalyptus. So you see that Eli Cohen, even under torture, didn't disclose what he has told to Israel. And thanks to that, and Borei Olam's help, we also conquer the Golan. I want to finish with Mizmor of Tehillim, that I want to read it for you in Hebrew and in English. This Mizmor, we say it every day, and I think that because we say it every day, we miss the special thing about this Mizmor. This Mizmor says, Shir HaMa'alot LeDavid, Lulei Adonai Shaya Lanu Yomarna Israel, says, if Borei Olam wouldn't have, this Mizmor was said by David HaMelech, Lulei Adonai Shaya Lanu, if Borei Olam wouldn't have been with us, Lulei Adonai Shaya Lanu, Bekum Aleinu Adam, when people race against us, with our enemies come and try to destroy us, Azai Chaim Belaunu, the enemy would have swallowed us alive. This is what they wanted. They wanted to throw the Jews to the sea. Pacharota Pambanu. Azai Maim Shetafuru Nachala Bara Nafshenu. Let me read for you a very good translation of this Mizmor in English. It's very, very nice. It's Mizmor 124. It says, a song of answers for David. Were it not Hashem who was for us, let Israel now say, were it not for Hashem who was with us, when people rose against us, then they would have swallowed us alive. When the wrath flared hot against us, then the waters would have swept us up. The torrent came up past our necks. Then it would have come past our necks the raging waters. Blessed is Hashem, who did not make us prey for their teeth. We are like a bird in the hands of a lion that wants to take us as prey. Our life is like a bird escape from the snare of the fowlers. The snare was broken, the cage was broken, and we escaped. Our help is in the name of Hashem, maker of heaven and earth. So we have a lot to be thankful to Borei Olam for the miracles that he did. And as I said at the beginning, the celebration of Yerushalayim is a celebration, first of all, of gratitude to Borei Olam that didn't abandon us, that gave us this incredible zechut of having Eretz Israel and Yerushalayim. Please don't take it for granted. The incredible bravery of our soldiers that never escaped, never ran away. When the Israelis were bombed in Tel Aviv, they didn't run away like the Palestinians did, and now the Palestinians, they are asking to get back. We didn't run away. we stay there because this is our land. And of course, to the imagination, to the knowledge, to the wisdom of our leaders, and to the heroism of people like Eli Cohen. So with that, I want to thank you for listening, and I wish everyone to have a Yom Yerushalayim Sameach. Thank you very much. Bye bye.